A splash of water and a fiery accusation in a chic cafe set Yvonne Carter, a spirited blonde waitress, on a collision course with millionaire Preston Langley, mistaken for a cheating fiancé. Their chaotic encounter, sparked by a bold red suit, ignites an unexpected romance orchestrated by Preston's audacious mother. Before diving in, share your city and rate this vibrant tale from 0 to 10 in the comments. The Azure Bean Cafe buzzed with the hum of mid-morning life, its polished oak tables gleaming under soft pendant lights. The scent of freshly ground coffee mingled with the faint perfume of pastries, creating an atmosphere of refined comfort. Yvonne Carter, a blonde waitress with a sharp tongue and sharper instincts, stood behind the counter, her green eyes scanning the room. Her apron was crisp, her ponytail slightly askew from a rushed morning, but her focus was razor-sharp. She'd heard Clara's tearful voice last night, recounting how Derek, her fiancé, had been spotted at this very cafe with another woman. The description was unmistakable. A red suit, slicked back blonde hair, a rose pinned to the lapel like some smug declaration of charm. Yvonne's gaze locked onto him the moment he walked in. There, by the window, sat the man in question, his crimson suit a garish beacon against the cafe's muted elegance. He leaned forward, laughing with a silver-haired woman whose poised demeanor suggested wealth and authority. Yvonne's blood simmered. "That's him," she muttered, her fingers tightening around a glass of ice water. Clara, her best friend since college, deserved better than a two-timing snake. Yvonne wasn't one to stand idly by while injustice brewed like oversteeped tea. Today, she'd serve justice, cold and sharp. She smoothed her apron, squared her shoulders, and marched toward the table, her heels clicking like a metronome of righteous fury on the hardwood floor. The cafe's chatter dulled as patrons sensed the storm approaching. A waiter, balancing a tray of cappuccinos, hesitated, his eyes darting toward her. Yvonne sidestepped him with the precision of a dancer, her focus unwavering. The man in the red suit looked up, his green eyes catching hers with a flicker of curiosity. The older woman beside him sipped her tea, oblivious to the brewing tempest. "Derek, you despicable cheat!" Yvonne's voice cut through the air, sharp enough to halt conversations mid-sentence. She flung the glass of water forward, and the icy cascade hit the man square in the face, soaking his pristine suit. Gasps rippled through the cafe. A fork clattered to the floor. The man sputtered, blinking through dripping water, while the older woman froze, her teacup halfway to her lips. "How dare you sit here laughing with another woman while Clara's at home crying over your betrayal?" Yvonne's words were a whip, each syllable cracking with indignation. "That red suit. Do you think it makes you untouchable? You're nothing but a low-life coward." The man wiped his face with a napkin, his expression shifting from shock to confusion. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice calm but edged with bewilderment. His green eyes, brighter than Clara had ever described, studied her with an intensity that made Yvonne falter for a split second. But she pressed on, undeterred. "Don't play innocent, Derek. I'm Yvonne Carter, Clara's best friend, and I know exactly what you've been doing. Parading around in broad daylight with—" She gestured at the older woman. "With all due respect, ma'am, someone who's too refined for this clown." The silver-haired woman set her teacup down with a delicate clink, her lips curling into a smile that was equal parts amusement and intrigue. She clapped her hands slowly, the sound sharp in the stunned silence. "Oh, my dear," she said, her voice carrying a refined lilt. "What a delightful mistake you've made." She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming like polished sapphires. "This isn't Derek. This is my son, Preston Langley, and I'm Vivian Langley. He's very much single, I assure you." Yvonne's heart lurched. The air seemed to thicken, pressing against her chest. She glanced at the man, Preston, not Derek, whose damp suit clung to his broad shoulders. His green eyes weren't Derek's dull blue. His jaw was sharper, his hair a shade darker despite the slicked-back style. Her gaze darted across the cafe, landing on another table 2 rows back. There, slinking toward the exit with a brunette on his arm, was the real Derek, his red suit, a mocking echo of Preston's. Yvonne's face burned, the weight of her mistake crashing down like a poorly timed curtain drop. "Oh no," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'm so sorry, I thought—" Her words faltered as she took a step back, wishing the marble floor would swallow her whole. The cafe's patrons stared, some whispering, others suppressing giggles. Preston, still dripping, raised an eyebrow, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "Kind of embarrassing," he said, his tone dry but not unkind. "Kind of?" Yvonne muttered, her bravado crumbling. She braced for a scolding, or worse, a lawsuit. But Vivian Langley stood, her elegant frame commanding the room's attention. Her eyes sparkled with something Yvonne couldn't quite place. Mischief, perhaps, or something more calculated. "What's your name, dear?" Vivian asked, her voice warm but firm. "Yvonne Carter," she replied, her throat dry. Vivian took her hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Yvonne Carter," she announced, loud enough for the entire cafe to hear. "A name with fire, a personality to match. You're perfect." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Yvonne blinked, confused. "Perfect for what?" "To set my son straight," Vivian declared, her smile widening. "Preston surrounds himself with shallow flatterers and predictable socialites. But you just stormed in here and called him a cheat in front of 50 strangers. I adore it." Preston coughed, his smirk fading. "Mom, please." "No, Preston," Vivian said, her tone brooking no argument. "This young woman has more spirit in one outburst than I've seen in years. Yvonne, you're going to marry my son." The cafe collectively choked. Yvonne's jaw dropped, her mind racing to process the absurdity. "Is this a prank?" she asked, scanning for hidden cameras. Vivian's smile didn't waver. "Not at all, dear. Refuse and I'll sue you for defamation and public humiliation. 36 witnesses can attest to that." Her tone was light, but the threat was steel-clad. Preston rubbed his temples, muttering, "Mom, this is insane." But Vivian was undeterred, her eyes locked on Yvonne. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., City Registry Office. Nothing fancy, just the paperwork. Preston, bring the witnesses." Yvonne's head spun. She wanted to run, to laugh it off, but Vivian's commanding presence and the weight of her words pinned her in place. The real Derek was long gone, leaving her to face the consequences of her impulsive act. "Fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I accept." The words felt foreign, as if someone else had spoken them. Vivian clapped her hands, delighted, while Preston stared at Yvonne, his expression a mix of resignation and curiosity. The cafe remained silent, every patron hanging on the unfolding drama like it was a live theater performance. Yvonne's heart pounded as she turned to leave, the cold autumn air hitting her face as she stepped onto the bustling city street. She had just agreed to marry a stranger, a millionaire no less, because of a mistaken splash of water. What had she gotten herself into? And why did Vivian Langley's smile hint at a plan far grander than a simple marriage? Yvonne Carter stumbled out of the Azure Bean Cafe, the city's pulse thrumming in her ears as she tried to process the chaos she'd just ignited. The autumn wind tugged at her blonde ponytail, chilling her flushed cheeks. Her heart still raced from the mortifying realization that she'd doused the wrong man, Preston Langley, not Derek, in ice water. And now, impossibly, she was bound to marry him. Vivian Langley's commanding voice echoed in her mind. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., City Registry Office. The threat of a lawsuit had been absurd, Yet Yvonne's impulsive agreement felt like a signature on a contract she hadn't read. She glanced back at the cafe's glass facade, where patrons still gawked, and spotted Preston wiping his damp suit, his green eyes catching hers with an unreadable glint. What kind of man lets his mother orchestrate his marriage to a stranger? She hurried to the apartment she shared with Clara, her mind a whirlwind of embarrassment and dread. Clara was sprawled on the couch, a bowl of popcorn balanced on her lap. Netflix paused on a rom-com. "Yvonne, you look like you just robbed a bank," Clara said, sitting up. "What happened?" Yvonne flung her purse onto the floor and collapsed beside her friend. "Worse than a bank robbery," she groaned. "I saw Derek at the cafe with that brunette, just like you said. Red suit, rose in the lapel. So I marched over, called him a cheat, and threw water in his face, except it wasn't Derek." Clara's eyes widened. "What? Who was it?" "Preston Langley, some millionaire. And his mother Vivian was there. She thought my outburst was hilarious and decided I'm the perfect match for her son. She demanded I marry him tomorrow, or she'll sue me for defamation." Yvonne buried her face in her hands. "Clara, I said yes. I don't even know why." Clara stared, then burst into laughter, nearly spilling her popcorn. "Only you, Yvonne, could turn a revenge plot into an arranged marriage." "Wait, is he at least good-looking?" Yvonne glared. "Not the point. He's got these intense green eyes, sure, but his mother's terrifying. She's like a queen ordering a royal wedding." Clara grabbed her phone. "We need to deal with Derek first. If I'm going to be your maid of honor in this insane wedding, I want my drama resolved." She dialed Derek, putting the call on speaker. "Hi, honey," his smug voice answered. "Mark, it's over," Clara said firmly. "I know you were at the cafe with another woman. Goodbye." She hung up, grinning. "Now, let's focus on your millionaire mess." The next morning, Yvonne stood before her mirror, smoothing the simple cream dress she'd worn to her last job interview. Her stomach churned with nerves. "This is madness," she muttered. But Clara, adjusting her outfit as a witness, smirked. "Madness is your brand, Yvonne. Own it." They arrived at the city registry office at 1:55 p.m. A stark, modern building that felt more like a bureaucratic checkpoint than a place for life-altering vows. Preston was already there, still in his red suit, dry now, his blonde hair slicked back, the rose replaced by a subtle pocket square. He looked resigned, yet a flicker of amusement danced in his eyes as he met Yvonne's gaze. Vivian Langley swept in, her silver hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights, her tailored navy coat exuding authority. "Yvonne, dear, you look radiant," she said, her smile warm but calculating. "Preston, don't slouch. This is a momentous day." Two men in suits, Preston's lawyer, James, and a colleague, stood as witnesses, their expressions a mix of professionalism and disbelief. The ceremony was swift, mechanical. Yvonne's voice trembled as she recited the vows, her mind screaming that this was a mistake. Preston's tone was steady, but his clenched jaw betrayed his unease. They signed the papers, exchanged no rings, and in 15 minutes, they were husband and wife. "Congratulations," James said, tucking the documents away. "You're now legally bound." Preston muttered. "How romantic," his sarcasm cutting through the sterile air. Yvonne forced a smile, her heart pounding. She'd married a stranger because of a misunderstanding and a mother's audacious whim. As they stepped outside, the city's noise felt deafening, amplifying her disorientation. Preston turned to her, his expression softening. "Welcome to my world, Yvonne. Let's try not to drown each other in coffee next time." They parted ways awkwardly, agreeing to meet later to sort out living arrangements. Yvonne returned to her apartment, where Clara was waiting, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "So, Mrs. Langley, how's married life?" she teased. Yvonne groaned, flopping onto the couch. It's not a marriage, it's a hostage situation. Vivian's got some plan. I can feel it. She's too deliberate. That evening, Yvonne arrived at Preston's penthouse, her suitcase in hand, her resolve wavering. The building's sleek lobby, with its marble floors and modern art, screamed wealth. The elevator ride to the top floor felt like ascending into another world. Preston opened the door, his shirt sleeves rolled up, revealing a hint of vulnerability beneath his polished exterior. "Welcome to your temporary home," he said, gesturing to a sprawling apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city's glittering skyline. The space was pristine, all sharp lines and minimalist decor, a stark contrast to Yvonne's cluttered, cozy life. "Temporary?" she asked, setting her suitcase down. Preston nodded, leaning against a counter. "This is a marriage of convenience, not a honeymoon. Guest rooms down the hall, bathroom included. Make it your own." Yvonne's shoulders relaxed slightly, but her curiosity burned. Why had he agreed to this? Was he as trapped by Vivian's will as she was? She glanced at him, catching a fleeting shadow in his eyes. Something unspoken, perhaps regret, perhaps defiance. As she unpacked in the guest room, her phone buzzed with a text from Clara. "Find out what Vivian's game is. That woman's playing chess while we're all playing checkers." Yvonne stared at the message, her unease growing. Vivian Langley's laughter in the cafe, her swift insistence on marriage, her threat of a lawsuit. It all felt like pieces of a larger puzzle. What did Vivian see in her, a waitress with a temper, to make her the centerpiece of such a bold move? And why did Preston, a man who could have anyone, go along with it? As she lay in the unfamiliar bed, the city's lights casting shadows across the ceiling, Yvonne felt the weight of a story just beginning, one where love, power, and secrets were yet to unfold. The city registry office loomed before Yvonne Carter, like a fortress of inevitability, its glass doors reflecting the gray October sky. Her cream dress clung to her frame, a relic of a job interview she'd aced years ago, now repurposed for a marriage she could barely comprehend. Her blonde ponytail swayed as she stepped forward, her heart hammering with a cocktail of dread and defiance. Clara, her best friend and reluctant witness, walked beside her, her dark curls bouncing with every step. "You're doing this, Yvonne," Clara whispered, her voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "Throwing water at a millionaire and ending up his wife? You're a legend," Yvonne shot her a glare. "A legend who's about to marry a stranger because his mom's a legal lunatic." Inside, the office was sterile, all white walls and humming fluorescence, a stark contrast to the chaos of the previous day at the Azure Bean Cafe. Yvonne's mind replayed the moment she'd doused Preston Langley, mistaking him for Clara's cheating fiancé, Derek. Vivian Langley's audacious demand, marry her son or face a lawsuit, had left her cornered. Agreeing had felt like signing a contract in a language she didn't speak, and now, at 1:58 p.m., she was minutes from binding herself to a man whose green eyes held secrets she couldn't yet read. Preston stood near the registrar's desk, his red suit replaced by a tailored charcoal one, the rose in his lapel swapped for a subtle silver pin. His blonde hair was still slicked back, but a slight tension in his jaw betrayed his unease. He met Yvonne's gaze, offering a half-smile that was equal parts resignation and intrigue. "Ready for the plunge?" he asked, his voice low, almost teasing. Yvonne swallowed, her throat dry. "As ready as I'll ever be for a shotgun wedding without the shotgun." Vivian Langley swept in, her silver hair gleaming like a crown, her navy coat exuding an authority that silenced the room. "Yvonne, you're a vision," she said, her smile warm but edged with purpose. "Preston, stand tall. This is a historic moment." Two men flanked her. James, Preston's lawyer, with a briefcase and a stoic expression, and a colleague named Thomas, whose raised eyebrows suggested he'd seen Vivian's theatrics before. Clara nudged Yvonne. "She's like a movie villain, but nice?" The ceremony began with mechanical precision. The officiant, a tired-looking woman with a clipboard, read the vows in a monotone that made Yvonne's stomach churn. She glanced at Preston, whose steady gaze anchored her despite the absurdity. "Do you, Yvonne Carter, take Preston Langley to be your lawful husband?" the officiant asked. Yvonne's voice caught, her mind screaming run, but Vivian's sapphire eyes locked onto hers, a silent reminder of the lawsuit threat. "I do," she said, her voice trembling but clear. Preston's "I do" followed, calm yet clipped, as if he too were wrestling with the moment's weight. They signed the papers, their signatures stark against the white forms. No rings were exchanged, no music played. Just the scratch of pens and the faint hum of the city outside. "Congratulations," James said, tucking the documents into his briefcase. "You're now legally husband and wife," Preston muttered, thrilling, his sarcasm sharp enough to cut glass. Yvonne forced a smile, her heart pounding like a trapped bird. She was married to a millionaire she'd met yesterday, all because of a splash of water and a mother's whim. The room felt too small, the air too thick. As they stepped outside, the city's noise crashed over her, honking taxis, chattering pedestrians, a reminder of the world she was no longer sure she belonged to. Vivian clapped her hands, her smile radiant. "Perfect. Now, Preston, take Yvonne to the penthouse. She'll need to settle in." Preston nodded, his expression unreadable. "I'll meet you at the car," he told Yvonne, heading toward a sleek, black sedan parked nearby. Clara grabbed Yvonne's arm. "You okay? This is a lot." Yvonne exhaled shakily. "I'm married to a stranger, Clara. Okay isn't in the vocabulary right now." The drive to Preston's penthouse was quiet, the city blurring past in a haze of neon and concrete. Yvonne stared out the window, her thoughts a tangle of regret and curiosity. Why had Preston agreed to this? Was he as trapped by Vivian's will as she was? Or was there something he wasn't saying? She glanced at him, his hands steady on the wheel, his profile sharp against the fading light. "Why didn't you fight her?" she asked suddenly. "Your mom. You could have said no." Preston's jaw tightened, but he kept his eyes on the road. Vivian Langley doesn't take no for an answer. Besides, fighting her in public would have been a spectacle I didn't need. His tone was guarded, but a flicker of something, amusement maybe, crossed his face. "And you? Why say yes?" Yvonne snorted. "A lawsuit wasn't on my to-do list. Plus, I was too stunned to think straight." She paused, studying him. "What's her game, Preston? Your mom's not just playing matchmaker for fun." He shrugged, but his grip on the wheel tightened. "She's strategic. Always has been. You'll figure that out soon enough." The vagueness of his answer sparked a prickle of unease in Yvonne's chest. There was a story here, one she was now a part of, whether she liked it or not. They arrived at the penthouse, a towering glass monument to wealth. The elevator ride to the top floor was silent, the air charged with unspoken questions. Preston opened the door to a sprawling apartment, its high ceilings and massive windows framing a glittering cityscape. The decor was sleek, white leather, chrome accents, a bookshelf organized by color that made Yvonne wince. "Welcome to your temporary home," Preston said, gesturing inside. "Guest room's down the hall. It's got its own bathroom. Make it yours." "Temporary?" Yvonne asked, setting her suitcase down. The word felt like a lifeline, a reminder this wasn't permanent. Preston nodded, leaning against the counter. "This is a marriage of convenience, not a love story. Let's keep it civil." His tone was matter-of-fact, but his eyes lingered on her, a spark of curiosity betraying his cool demeanor. As Yvonne unpacked in the guest room, her phone buzzed with another text from Clara. Dig into Vivian's plan. She's not just a meddling mom. She's got an agenda. Yvonne stared at the message, her unease deepening. The penthouse, with its cold elegance, felt like a stage for a play she didn't understand. Vivian's insistence, Preston's compliance, the swiftness of it all. What was the end game? And why did Preston's fleeting glances make her wonder if he was as lost in this as she was? As she lay in the unfamiliar bed, the city's lights casting long shadows, Yvonne felt the stirrings of a mystery she was determined to unravel, one that might change her life forever. Yvonne Carter stood in the guest room of Preston Langley's penthouse, her suitcase open on the plush bed, its contents a stark contrast to the apartment's sterile elegance. The city's skyline glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, a dazzling reminder of the surreal turn her life had taken. Yesterday, she was a waitress at the Azure Bean Cafe, hurling water at a man she mistook for a cheater. Today, she was Mrs. Langley, married to a millionaire stranger under the iron will of his mother, Vivian. The word temporary from Preston's lips echoed in her mind as she hung her worn jackets in a closet larger than her old bedroom. This marriage of convenience was a tightrope, and Yvonne was already wobbling. Preston's voice drifted from the living room. "Yvonne, you settling in?" His tone was casual, but there was a guarded edge to it, as if he, too, was navigating uncharted territory. She stepped out, finding him at the kitchen island, scrolling through his phone. The apartment was a study in precision. Sleek furniture, a color-coded bookshelf, and a coffee machine that looked like it could launch a rocket. "This place is intense," she said, gesturing at the high-tech kitchen. "Do you ever actually cook here?" Preston smirked, his green eyes glinting. "I have people for that. You hungry?" Yvonne shook her head, her stomach still knotted from the day's events. "I'm more curious about how you live like this. It's like a museum, not a home." His smirk faltered, and for a moment, she glimpsed something raw beneath his polished exterior. Loneliness, perhaps. "It's functional," he said, shrugging. "You'll get used to it." But getting used to it was a challenge. The next morning, Yvonne decided to make breakfast, a small act of normalcy in this alien world. The kitchen's gleaming appliances mocked her. She pressed a button on the stove, expecting a simple flame, but a digital panel lit up, beeping furiously. "What is this, a spaceship?" she muttered, jabbing at random buttons. A sudden whoosh of heat sent her stumbling back, and the smoke alarm screeched. Preston rushed in, still in pajamas, his hair mussed. "What's happening?" he shouted, grabbing a towel to fan the alarm. "Trying to make pancakes," Yvonne yelled over the noise, her face flushed. "Your stove's worth more than my car." Preston climbed onto a chair, silencing the alarm with a practiced jab. He turned to her, half laughing, half exasperated. "That's a $12,000 induction range. You don't just make pancakes on it." Yvonne crossed her arms. "For that price, it should cook itself." Despite the chaos, Preston's chuckle was genuine, a crack in his guarded facade that made Yvonne's pulse quicken. Their differences sparked daily skirmishes. Yvonne, restless in the sterile penthouse, rearranged Preston's bookshelf by genre, muttering, "Color-coding books is for robots." Preston returned home to find his carefully curated shelves in disarray. "You moved everything," he said, standing at the door, his voice a mix of irritation and amusement. "It's better now," Yvonne replied, grinning. "There's energy, flow. Before, it was a home decor magazine, soulless." Preston ran a hand through his hair. "You're going to drive me insane." But his eyes lingered on her, a spark of curiosity betraying his words. The pranks escalated. Preston hid the TV remote, forcing Yvonne to navigate his labyrinthine smart home app. She retaliated by swapping his sugar with salt, serving him a salty espresso he choked on. "A new recipe," she said innocently, dodging his playful glare. Each clash chipped away at their mutual wariness, revealing glimpses of humor and resilience. Yet Yvonne couldn't shake Clara's warning. Vivian's playing chess. What was the end game? Preston's compliance, his fleeting glances. Did he know more than he let on? At the Meridian Grand Hotel, where Yvonne worked as an event coordinator, her new reality collided with her old life. Her first shift post-marriage was a whirlwind of floral arrangements and client demands, but the weight of her ringless marriage clung to her. She caught sight of herself in a mirror, her blonde hair pulled back, her waitress instincts still sharp. Then she saw Miranda Holt, her college rival, now the hotel's general manager. Miranda's icy smile was a blade. "Yvonne Carter, still coordinating events? Oh, wait, Mrs. Langley now, I hear." Her tone dripped with mockery, and Yvonne's stomach tightened. How did Miranda know? The sabotage began subtly. Miranda altered Yvonne's schedule last minute, assigning her impossible tasks like a gala for 300 with half the staff. Derek, Clara's ex, now a financial consultant, joined the fray, questioning Yvonne's budgets and meetings. "Your last event was 10% over budget," he said smugly, brandishing falsified reports. Yvonne's jaw clenched, but she held her ground. "Client changes, all documented," she shot back, her voice steady despite the sting. The attacks felt personal, coordinated, as if Miranda and Derek sensed her vulnerability as the new Mrs. Langley. One evening, Yvonne returned to the penthouse, exhausted but defiant. Preston was there, sipping whiskey, his tie loosened. "Rough day?" he asked, his tone softer than usual. She slumped onto the couch. "My co-workers are trying to bury me. Miranda and Derek, they're out for blood." Preston's brow furrowed. "Derek? Clara's Derek?" Yvonne nodded, recounting the sabotage. Preston set his glass down, his expression darkening. "Sounds like they're testing you, or someone's pulling strings." "Someone like your mother?" Yvonne asked, half joking. But Preston's silence was telling. He stood, pacing to the window. "Vivian's involved. She owns the Meridian." Yvonne's breath caught. "She what? Why didn't you tell me?" Preston turned, his eyes conflicted. "I didn't want you to think this marriage was about her controlling you, but Vivian always has a plan." Yvonne's mind raced. Was her job, her marriage, all part of Vivian's chessboard? And why did Preston's guarded look make her wonder if he was a pawn or a player? As she lay in bed that night, the city's lights casting restless shadows, Yvonne felt the weight of her new life. The penthouse, the marriage, the sabotage at work. It was a puzzle with missing pieces. Vivian's grand design loomed, but so did Preston's quiet support. His rare smiles, hinting at depths she hadn't explored. What was Vivian orchestrating, and how far would it pull Yvonne into a world she barely understood? The answers, she sensed, were closer than she thought, hidden in the clash of their worlds. Yvonne Carter navigated the polished halls of the Meridian Grand Hotel with a clipboard in hand, her blonde ponytail swaying as she checked the setup for the evening's gala. The weight of her new life as Mrs. Preston Langley pressed against her, a constant reminder of the surreal marriage she'd stumbled into. The penthouse clashes with Preston, salty espressos, rearranged books, had sparked an uneasy camaraderie, but her suspicions about Vivian Langley's grand design lingered like a shadow. Preston's revelation that his mother owned the hotel had ignited a spark of unease. Was her job, her marriage, merely pieces on Vivian's chessboard? At work, the stakes were rising, and Yvonne felt the noose tightening. Miranda Holt, her college rival turned general manager, greeted Yvonne with a smile that could cut glass. "Yvonne, the gala's client list just doubled. I trust you'll handle it?" Miranda's voice was honeyed, but her eyes gleamed with malice. Yvonne nodded, her jaw tight. "I'll manage." She'd faced Miranda's barbs before, but the sabotage had escalated since her marriage. Derek, Clara's cheating ex, now a financial consultant, was Miranda's eager accomplice, nitpicking her budgets and whispering critiques in staff meetings. Their attacks felt orchestrated, as if they sensed Yvonne's new status made her a bigger target. The gala, a fundraiser for a children's charity, was the hotel's biggest event of the quarter. Yvonne had spent weeks ensuring every detail was flawless. Crystal chandeliers sparkling, white orchids arranged in precise arcs, a 5-course menu curated by a renowned chef. But as the day approached, Miranda's interference grew bolder. She reassigned half of Yvonne's staff to a last-minute corporate lunch, leaving her scrambling. Derek, meanwhile, flagged discrepancies in her budget, presenting inflated figures to the hotel's board. "Yvonne, your catering costs are 15% over projections," he said in a meeting, his smirk barely concealed. Yvonne countered with documented client requests, but the seed of doubt was sown. The morning of the gala, Miranda approached Yvonne in the bustling event hall, her heels clicking ominously. "The event starts at 7 p.m., Yvonne. Don't be late." Her tone was casual, but Yvonne's instincts screamed trap. She double-checked the schedule on her phone, 6 p.m., confirmed by the client. Miranda's lie was deliberate, a calculated move to make her fail. Yvonne's blood boiled, but she kept her composure, nodding. "Got it." She spent the day triple-checking details, her nerves fraying under the pressure of Miranda's game. At 5:45 p.m., Yvonne was finalizing the seating chart when her phone buzzed with a text from Clara. "Watch your back. Miranda's been cozy with Derek all day." Yvonne's stomach churned. She arrived at the gala at 5:55, the room already filling with Manhattan's elite. The clock struck 6, and the event began smoothly, until Miranda's voice rang out at 6:15. "Yvonne, where were you? The client expected you at 5. Heads turned, guests whispering as Yvonne stood frozen, her face burning. The schedule, displayed on a screen for all to see, now read 5 p.m., altered to make her look incompetent. "It was 6 p.m., Miranda," Yvonne said, her voice steady despite the humiliation. "You told me 7. Miranda feigned shock, her hand to her chest. "Dear, it's always been 5. Check the records." Derek appeared, holding a tablet. "I can confirm, Yvonne. The original schedule was 5 p.m. The falsified document glared at her, a digital betrayal. Yvonne's fists clenched, but before she could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Enough of this nonsense!" Vivian Langley swept into the room, her pink Chanel suit a beacon of authority, her silver hair catching the chandelier's light. The crowd parted, sensing her power. "Miranda, your theatrics are tiresome," she said, her sapphire eyes icy. "Yvonne, my daughter-in-law has been sabotaged, and I won't stand for it." Gasps rippled through the room. Yvonne's heart pounded. Vivian's presence was no coincidence. "Mrs. Langley," Miranda stammered, her face paling. "There's been a misunderstanding." Vivian raised a hand, silencing her. "I own the Meridian Grand, Miranda. Did you think I wouldn't notice your petty schemes?" She turned to Yvonne, her expression softening. "Yvonne, you've proven your competence despite these obstacles. Effective immediately. You're the Vice President of Operations." The room fell silent, Miranda's jaw dropping, Derek shrinking back. Yvonne blinked, stunned. "Vice President?" she whispered. Vivian nodded, her smile both warm and calculating. "You've earned it. And Miranda, consider this your warning. Cross my family again, and you're out." She handed Yvonne a folder with her new contract, her eyes gleaming with unspoken intent. "Lead well, dear." As Vivian glided away, the gala resumed, but Yvonne felt the weight of her new title and Vivian's influence, like a crown she wasn't sure she could wear. Later, in the quiet of the penthouse, Yvonne sat on the couch, the contract open on her lap. Preston entered, loosening his tie, his green eyes searching her face. "Heard about your promotion," he said, sitting beside her. "Mom doesn't hand those out lightly." Yvonne met his gaze, her suspicion flaring. "Did you know she was going to do this?" Preston hesitated, then shook his head. "I knew she had plans, but not the details. Vivian plays a long game." Yvonne's mind raced. The promotion was a lifeline, but also a leash. Vivian's orchestration, her marriage, her job, felt like a web tightening around her. Why was Vivian so invested in her rise? And why did Preston's guarded answers make her wonder what he wasn't saying? "She's using me," Yvonne said, her voice low. "But for what?" Preston leaned closer, his expression softening. "You're not wrong to question her, but you're stronger than her games." His words were a comfort, but his fleeting glance toward the city skyline hinted at secrets yet to unravel. As Yvonne lay in bed that night, the city's lights casting restless patterns, she felt the pull of a larger mystery. Miranda and Derek's sabotage was personal, but Vivian's intervention was strategic. Was she a pawn in a corporate empire, or something more? And why did Preston's quiet support make her heart ache, with a mix of trust and trepidation? The answers, she knew, were buried in the empire Vivian ruled, and Yvonne was determined to uncover them. Yvonne Carter stood in the grand ballroom of the Meridian Grand Hotel, her new title of Vice President of Operations, a heavy mantle on her shoulders. The chandeliers cast a golden glow over the polished tables, but the air was thick with tension from the recent gala, where Miranda Holt and Derek had nearly derailed her career with their sabotage. Vivian Langley's dramatic intervention, promoting Yvonne in front of a stunned crowd, had shifted the power dynamic, but Yvonne knew the battle was far from over. Miranda's icy politeness and Derek's lingering smirks were proof that their vendetta was personal, and Vivian's cryptic motives loomed like a storm cloud. Yvonne's blonde ponytail swung as she checked the staff roster, her green eyes sharp with determination. She was no longer just a waitress caught in a bizarre marriage. She was a leader, and she'd prove it. The morning after her promotion, Yvonne was overseeing preparations for a corporate luncheon when she heard raised voices echoing from the service hallway. Her instincts kicked in, honed from years of diffusing cafe disputes. She followed the sound, her heels clicking against the marble floor, and found Maria Delgado, a dedicated waitress with a warm smile and a knack for detail, cornered by Miranda and Robert Chen, the food and beverage supervisor. Maria's eyes were red, her hands trembling as she clutched a tissue. "I swear, Mr. Chen, I didn't take anything," she said, her voice breaking. Robert crossed his arms, his face stern. "2 bottles of Chateau Lafite are missing from the stockroom, Maria. You were the last one there last night." Yvonne's blood simmered. She'd known Maria for 2 years. Her tireless work ethic, her pride in supporting her 2 young children alone after her husband left. Maria was no thief. Miranda stepped forward, her smile dripping with false sympathy. "Maria, we know things have been tight. Selling those bottles could have helped, right?" Yvonne's fists clenched. Miranda's tone was a calculated jab, and Robert's quick accusations reeked of complicity. She stepped into the fray. "What's going on here?" Robert straightened, his tone shifting to deference. "Vice President Carter, we're handling a theft. Maria took 2 bottles of wine from the stockroom." Yvonne raised an eyebrow. "That's a serious claim, Robert. Where's your proof?" Miranda interjected, her voice smooth. "Circumstantial evidence, Yvonne. Maria was the last in the stockroom, and the bottles vanished overnight." Maria shook her head, tears spilling. "I only got glasses for the luncheon. I locked up at 10:30 p.m. Yvonne's mind raced, piecing together the scene. Miranda's presence, her quickness to accuse, it mirrored the gala sabotage. "Show me the stockroom," Yvonne said, her tone calm but unyielding. They descended to the basement where the climate-controlled room housed rows of gleaming bottles. Robert pointed to a shelf. "Third row, 12 bottles for tonight's event. Now there's 10. Yvonne examined the area, her eyes scanning for discrepancies. "Maria, walk me through your actions last night." Maria's voice steadied as she recounted. "I took 6 boxes of glasses from that cabinet, checked everything, and locked up at 10:30. Yvonne nodded, her gaze shifting to Robert. "Who else has access to this room?" Robert hesitated. "Management, supervisors, and the cleaning crew." Yvonne's eyes narrowed. "Cleaning crew? When do they work?" 11 p.m. to 6 a.m., Robert replied, shifting uncomfortably. "Did you check with them?" Silence. Miranda's smile faltered. "We didn't think it was necessary," Robert said. "The evidence points to Maria." "Evidence?" Yvonne's voice was sharp. "You've got assumptions, not facts. Get me a list of everyone who entered the stockroom in the last 48 hours. Robert returned 20 minutes later with a printout. Yvonne scanned it, her pulse quickening. Maria's entry was logged at 10:30 p.m., exit at 10:45. But at 11:15, Tom Harper, a cleaning crew member, entered, and there was no exit record. "Interesting," Yvonne murmured. "Tom didn't clock out. System error or something else?" She summoned Tom to her office, a sleek space on the 12th floor, with a view of the city's skyline. Tom, a wiry man in his 50s, sweated despite the air conditioning, his eyes darting between Yvonne, Miranda, and Robert. "Tom," Yvonne said calmly, "were you in the stockroom last night?" He nodded, his voice shaky. "Just cleaning, ma'am. Nothing unusual." Yvonne leaned forward. "Your badge didn't log an exit. Why?" Tom stammered. "I forgot to clock out." Yvonne's gaze was steady. "In 7 years, how often do you forget?" Tom's shoulders slumped. "Rarely, ma'am." Yvonne stood, pacing to the window, her mind clicking like a lock turning. "Tom, you live in the suburbs, right? Take the train home at 6 a.m. He nodded, sweating more. "Hard to carry 2 bottles of wine on a crowded train, isn't it? Easier to stash them in your locker here. Pick them up later." The room went silent. Tom's face crumpled. "How'd you know?" he whispered. Yvonne's voice softened. "Logic. Maria doesn't drink, has kids to support, and an impeccable record. You have access at night, no oversight." Tom broke down. "My wife's sick, the meds. I needed the money." Yvonne turned to Maria, whose tears were now of relief. "Maria, you're cleared. I'm promoting you to event supervisor, effective immediately." Maria sobbed. "Thank you, ma'am." To Robert, Yvonne said, "Tom keeps his job, but he's transferred to maintenance with reduced pay. Find him resources for his wife's care." Robert nodded, chastened. Then to Miranda, alone in her office, Yvonne's tone hardened. "You knew it wasn't Maria, didn't you? You let an innocent woman take the fall." Miranda's composure cracked. I didn't," Yvonne cut her off. "You knew Tom's situation just like you know everyone's. This was a setup to undermine me." Miranda's silence was damning. "Last chance, Miranda. Sabotage anyone again, and you're gone." As Miranda left, pale and shaken, Yvonne felt a mix of triumph and unease. Vivian's promotion had given her power, but at what cost? Was this another move in Vivian's game? That night, in the penthouse, Yvonne shared the incident with Preston, who listened, his green eyes intense. "You handled it like a pro," he said, but his tone held a question. "Mom's got you on a pedestal. Why?" Yvonne's unease grew. "She's building me up, but for what?" Preston's silence, his fleeting glance away, hinted at secrets. Was he complicit, or just as caught in Vivian's web? as Yvonne stared at the city lights. She knew the next move in this game would reveal more than she was ready for. Yvonne Carter sat at her new desk on the 12th floor of the Meridian Grand Hotel, the city's skyline sprawling beyond her office window like a glittering chessboard. Her promotion to vice president, orchestrated by Preston Langley, had solidified her authority but deepened her unease. The confrontation with Miranda Holt and the resolution of Maria's false theft accusation had proven Yvonne's mettle. But the victory felt like a move in a larger game, one where Vivian held the pieces, and Yvonne was still deciphering the rules. Her marriage to Preston Langley, born from a mistaken splash of water, and his mother's audacious decree, was no longer just a contractual farce. Their daily clashes, salty espressos, rearranged books, had sparked a fragile connection, but Preston's guarded silences hinted at secrets. Was he a pawn like her, or a player in Vivian's scheme? The following Monday, Yvonne received an unexpected email from Preston. Meeting at Langley Enterprises, 3 p.m. Your hotel expertise is needed. Trust me, her brow furrowed. Preston had never mentioned his work beyond vague references to tech, and his invitation felt like a curveball. She replied, "Why me?" His response was swift. "You'll see. Just come." Curiosity battled suspicion as she prepared for the day, her blonde ponytail tight, her navy blazer crisp. Miranda, now a model of forced professionalism, avoided her gaze in the hotel's halls. But Yvonne sensed her rival's resentment simmering. Clara's text buzzed her phone. "Preston's pulling you into his world. Watch for Vivian's fingerprints." Yvonne's unease grew. What was waiting at Langley Enterprises? At 2:45 p.m., Preston arrived at the hotel lobby, his dark gray suit accentuating his sharp jaw and green eyes. "Ready?" he asked, his smile disarming yet tinged with nerves. Yvonne nodded, her clipboard left behind, a symbol of her shift from coordinator to executive. The drive to Langley Tower was quiet, the city's hum muffled by the sedan's leather interior. Preston's fingers tapped the wheel, his silence louder than words. "What's this meeting about?" Yvonne pressed. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Investment strategy. Your perspective matters." His vagueness stoked her suspicion, but the spark in his eyes, part challenge, part intrigue, kept her from pushing further. Langley Tower loomed in the financial district, its glass facade reflecting the afternoon sun like a beacon of power. The elevator to the 40th floor was a silent ascent into a world Yvonne barely understood. When the doors opened, a sleek hallway led to a conference room where 20 executives sat around a table the size of her old apartment. A receptionist approached. "Mr. Langley, they're waiting." Yvonne's steps faltered. "Mr. Langley?" she whispered, her heart racing. Preston guided her inside, his hand light on her back. "Trust me for now," he murmured, his voice steady but urgent. The meeting began with formalities, and Yvonne was introduced as a hotel management consultant, her presence sparking curious glances. The CFO, a stern man named Richardson, launched into a report. "The Meridian Grand's performance last quarter raises concerns. A 12% drop in guest satisfaction, 18% cost overrun, and multiple staff misconduct incidents." Yvonne's blood ran cold. The numbers were lies, a mirror of Miranda's sabotage at the hotel. She raised a hand, her voice calm but firm. "May I see those documents?" Richardson hesitated, glancing at Preston, who nodded. The pages Yvonne scanned were a masterclass in deception. Dates altered, figures inflated, incidents fabricated. "These are false," she said, standing, her voice cutting through the room's murmurs. A ripple of surprise followed. Richardson bristled. "That's a serious accusation, Ms. Carter." Yvonne's eyes locked onto his. "It's Mrs. Langley, and I can prove it." She pulled out her phone, accessing the hotel's real-time data. Guest satisfaction is at 94% this quarter, up from 90%. Costs rose 4%, tied to approved upgrades. No misconduct incidents exist. She strode to the whiteboard, marker in hand, presenting the real figures with precision. Her bilingual fluency shone as she translated key points into Spanish. A nod to the hotel's diverse clientele, silencing doubters with her command. "Who provided these reports?" Yvonne asked, her tone icy. Richardson shifted. "An external source. The hotel's manager, Miranda Holt." Yvonne's jaw tightened. Miranda's sabotage had reached beyond the hotel, aiming to discredit her on a corporate stage. "Miranda suggested I wasn't qualified for this meeting," Yvonne added, her gaze sweeping the room. "Yet here I am, correcting her lies." The executives exchanged glances, impressed yet unsettled. Preston stood, his presence commanding the room. "Ladies and gentlemen, let's clarify. Yvonne Langley is not just a consultant. She's vice president of the Meridian Grand and my wife." Murmurs erupted. "Anyone undermining her undermines me. And yes, I'm president of Langley Enterprises." Yvonne's breath caught. "President?" The revelation hit like a thunderbolt, reshaping her understanding of Preston's guarded silences. "Miranda's actions are unacceptable," he continued, his voice steel. "We expect excellence, not sabotage." The room fell silent. Richardson pale, the executives nodding. Yvonne's heart pounded, not just from the victory, but from Preston's fierce defense. As the meeting ended, the elevator ride down was charged with unspoken words. "You're the president," Yvonne said, leaning against the wall. "Why hide it?" Preston's smile was wry. "I wanted you to shine on your own. You did." His honesty softened her, but his mother's shadow loomed. "Was this Vivian's test?" she asked. Preston's silence was answer enough. That evening, Preston suggested dinner at a small Italian bistro in the village, a departure from his usual Michelin star haunts. The cozy restaurant, with its handwritten menu and candlelit tables, felt like a rebellion against their polished lives. Giuseppe, the waiter, declared, "Newlyweds, I make you something special," and served steaming plates of linguine alle vongole. Yvonne laughed as Preston fumbled with the pasta, sauce on his chin. "You're hopeless," she teased, showing him how to twirl it. Their laughter, the clink of wine glasses, the accordion music Giuseppe played. It was their first unguarded moment, a spark of something real. Walking home, the city's cool air wrapped around them. Preston draped his coat over Yvonne's shoulders, his touch lingering. At a quiet fountain, he stopped, his eyes intense. "Yvonne, I thought this marriage was a mistake. I was wrong. You're incredible." His confession, raw and unguarded, stole her breath. Was this love or another move in Vivian's game? As their lips met, soft, then deepening, Yvonne felt the world shift. But the question of Vivian's true plan burned brighter than ever. The morning after their kiss beneath the fountain, Yvonne awoke in Preston's penthouse to the dazzling view of the city sprawled beneath the glass walls. But her heart was still caught between disbelief and anticipation. The echo of his words, "We might start to like each other," lingered in her ears, making her pulse race faster than the coffee machine sputtering in the kitchen. She found him reading the newspaper, the red suit replaced by a crisp charcoal one, his posture composed, yet softened by a glance that spoke volumes. Before she could decipher the meaning of his half-smile, her phone buzzed with a call from Sophie, her younger sister, who announced in a rush that their parents had decided to visit that weekend. Yvonne stiffened, a wave of unease passing through her. She had not seen Edward and Lillian Carter since the wedding fiasco, and the thought of introducing them to Preston in this glittering palace of glass filled her with both dread and determination. When Saturday arrived, Yvonne's nerves had reached a fever pitch. Edward and Lillian stepped into the penthouse, their modest attire starkly contrasting with the sleek marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Sophie trailed behind, her eyes wide with awe, whispering, "Yvonne, this place looks like something out of a movie." Edward, however, carried his skepticism like a shield, his brow furrowing as he surveyed the grandeur. "So this is how the Langley fortune lives," he muttered, his tone a mixture of admiration and suspicion. Preston, unbothered, extended a firm handshake and welcomed them with effortless charm, offering wine and hors d'oeuvres as though he had rehearsed the role of son-in-law for years. Yvonne held her breath, waiting for the inevitable clash between her father's pride and Preston's wealth, a collision that could fracture the fragile peace she had begun to build. The storm arrived sooner than expected. Over dinner, Edward broached the subject of the family's antique shop, explaining that business had been thriving, but the leap to digital sales was proving impossible without serious capital. "We need investors who believe in our vision," he said, his fork clinking sharply against the china. Lillian added, her voice tight with worry, that local competition was threatening to swallow their niche. Sophie looked at Yvonne hopefully, her eyes silently pleading for help. Yvonne hesitated, unsure whether to expose her family's vulnerability to Preston. But before she could speak, Preston leaned forward, his voice calm yet decisive. "How much do you need?" Edward bristled at the directness, replying that money was not charity and that they would never accept a handout. But Preston shook his head. "I wasn't offering charity," he said smoothly. "I'm offering Pia partnership. I'll provide $150,000, but you'll retain 70% ownership. I'll bring the online infrastructure, the logistics, and the advertising. Your legacy remains yours." The room fell silent, the weight of Preston's offer pressing against every doubt and hope. Edward's eyes narrowed, searching for arrogance in Preston's tone, but all he found was certainty. Yvonne, caught between shock and gratitude, felt her chest tighten as she watched her father's rigid mask begin to crack. "Why would you do this?" Edward asked finally, his voice softer, betraying the fragile thread of trust forming. Preston's answer was simple, yet profound. "Because Yvonne believes in you, and I believe in her. Supporting your family is not just smart business, it's honoring her." Lillian's eyes glistened with tears. Sophie reached for Yvonne's hand under the table, and Edward exhaled heavily, conceding with a nod. For the first time, Yvonne saw her family's doubt about her reckless marriage bend into cautious acceptance. That acceptance deepened into pride weeks later at the elite business gala, the most glittering event of the year, held beneath a canopy of crystal chandeliers and velvet drapes. Yvonne arrived in a flowing navy gown, her hand tucked in Preston's arm, her heart pounding as flashbulbs erupted from cameras at every turn. The crowd of CEOs, politicians, and media magnates seemed overwhelming, but she walked with her head held high, aware that she no longer stood at the margins of power. She was at its center. Vivian Langley commanded the stage, her presence as sharp and elegant as a blade. And when she called Yvonne to join her before the hushed assembly, whispers rippled through the hall like a rising tide. Vivian's voice rang out clear as glass. "Tonight I make it official. Langley Enterprises will not only be led by blood, but by strength of character. I hereby transfer 55% of this company's ownership to my daughter-in-law, Yvonne Carter Langley." Gasps spread across the gala, champagne glasses pausing mid-air, cameras flashing furiously to capture the seismic announcement. Yvonne froze, her pulse hammering, her mind barely able to comprehend the magnitude of Vivian's declaration. Preston squeezed her hand firmly, anchoring her, as Vivian placed the signed documents into her grasp. "You are family now," Vivian said, her eyes glinting with something almost tender. "And family carries legacy." Miranda, standing at the edge of the crowd, visibly paled, her lips pressed into a thin line as her last hopes of power slipped through her fingers. Yvonne, struggling to find her voice, managed to thank Vivian with quiet dignity, though inside her thoughts whirled with fear and exhilaration. She had gone from mistaken bride to the majority owner of one of the largest enterprises in the city, and the weight of that responsibility pressed on her shoulders with intoxicating force. The night ended with fireworks lighting up the sky above the city, but the true spark lay in the renewed vows Preston and Yvonne exchanged days later in the park, beneath an arch of roses and fairy lights. Clara stood proudly as maid of honor. Sophie dabbed at tears, and even Edward's stoic face softened as he watched his daughter smile with unfeigned joy. Preston held Yvonne's hands, his voice steady, yet tinged with emotion as he promised, "This time, we marry not by accident or pressure, but by choice." Yvonne's reply carried the weight of every mistake, every triumph, every kiss that had brought them here. "I choose you," she whispered, and the words seemed to bind them tighter than any contract ever could. As their lips met beneath the glow of lanterns and the applause of loved ones, Yvonne knew the chaos of the red suit had transformed into the foundation of a fortune, both in family and in love. Thank you so much for staying with me through this chapter of Yvonne and Preston's whirlwind journey. Every twist, every clash, and every tender moment is meant to remind us that love and fate often bloom in the most unexpected places. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What part moved you the most, and what do you think lies ahead for them? Share your feelings in the comments, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to follow along for the next chapter. Your support means the world, and I can't wait to meet you again in our next tale.